topics come to mind, and I would appreciate hearing from each of you briefly, because we only have 30 minutes. I don't want to preoccupy the whole time. One is sustainability. Sustainability. The other is inclusiveness, inclusion. And each of you addressed these in rather different ways, but we have a very serious situation in India and throughout the world right now. And it would be wonderful if we could hear your thoughts about what is to be done right now with sustainability and inclusion.
Continuation with what Anuji said. Sri Aurobindo's open later after the Alipur jail, the release from the Alipur jail. So the date is July 1909, where he says our ideal is that of Swaraj, absolute autonomy, free from foreign control. We claim that the right of every nation to live in its own life by its own energies according to its own nature and ideals. It's a lecture that everybody here, if they are not already read it, should read. There he says that no nation has the right to trample upon any other nation, which today means India has no right to trample upon Pakistan. The second thing this lecture says, that we cannot achieve Swaraj by promoting hatred, contempt and violence. This lecture also says a lot about boycott, passive resistance, all the things that Gandhi had to say later, but it is the same year when Hind Swaraj is published. Is absolutely the same year when the two minds are saying exactly the very identical thing. He says, I may give up. Probably is thinking of going out of politics, and he says, who will continue this struggle for Swaraj? Maybe another leader will come, and probably that's a forecast of Gandhi to come. There is a very clear statement that such a person will come and take it forward. I am saying that after Sri Aurobindo was no more and Gandhi was no more, in India we had an overwhelming presence of the so-called Gandhians or the Gandhians dominating in politics, culture and in a way this apparent animosity between those who admired Sri Aurobindo's teachings and those who admired Gandhi was inevitable in that situation. But today, when a law which says that Jews and Muslims from Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan will not be given shelter in India is passed by brute force, not a spiritual force, is it not time for us to know and say in clear, unmistakable words that Sri Aurobindo and Gandhi are one piece? That they cannot be, either of these cannot be hijacked by the Hindutva brigade, and that is question one. Setting aside some other philosophical differences, because they both fought for our Swaraj and the ultimate liberation of humanity. The second thing, we have an Orwellian vision of the people in this country today. Like what Hitler said about the people, must be dominated by brute force. We have a choice, the Orwellian vision of society or the Aurovillian vision of the society. And if Auroville is an international community, it must find it painful to know that next door the Jews and the Muslims are denied equality. And Auroville, despite whatever policies it has, must say in clear words it is expected that this law is wrong. It will carry a great weight because it is not from the United Nations, it is from within India. It is from the tradition of Swaraj, that Sri Aurobindo. Is it not a moral? It might upset some works, material works here, but is it not a moral call for Auroville to challenge Orwellian vision of India, get up and say, this law is unjust and we would like to fight it? Or is Auroville a perpetual passivity waiting for destiny to unfold the long evolutionary process?
Sri Aurobindo at that point took the position, he called on the British government he called on all the Indians to support the British government against Hitler. And of course, including his own disciples, they were very shocked. How can you do that? You were part of the freedom movement. You wanted to get the British out. How can you say that? His responses was that, okay, if we don't say that, what is the alternative? Because if this force takes over the world, then there is no hope for the world. The work that he was doing, there was no hope for the freedom of India, there was no hope for the world. So that is that position. What you are saying is written in that first dream that I don't know if you were here when I was reading it out. So that is implied that this division, when he says this division must go, he means not so much the fact that we have to go and fight a war or go and kill and ransack or whatever. It was that actually the suggestions he was giving were that it should be as far as possible sorted through peaceful, cultural, cooperative means. He actually, this particular version which was read out in All India Radio was a slightly reduced version because of time. In the complete version, he also suggested other means of bridging that gap through dual citizenship and other things. So actually he was thinking already in those radical terms. Now, with what is happening now, Auroville has been given a certain, has had to take a certain step, which has been said by the mother actually, that we have no politics here. And this is very hard for most of us because we see what is happening around. Some of us comment in different ways, but in general, this comment has not gone out in an official way. Because this is also very, it's hard because this work on the front of it, as I said, multicultural, blah, 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 all that looks very nice and exotic, but actually it's an extremely hard work. And at the crux of it, it's the change of consciousness. It is the evolution of, we are not, there's a lot of work happening, which is part of Auroville's work, which is whether it is sustainability or the green work or, upliftment, everything is there. But the crux of it, the aim of it, is this change of consciousness. Because until that is achieved, the real change on earth, the real change in humanity is not going to happen. And that is the work we have to take with utmost seriousness, which is not happening. It's a little bit wishy-washy, I have to agree to that. How can we take this position? I don't know. I've thought many times of writing, because I have been writing about, on different things, but it's not a personal thing, because as soon as I'm part of Auroville, I have to also respect its positions, because if I speak, Auroville is implied. And there is the agreement or disagreement, or even the safety of each one, because we are seeing how things are working out. So I cannot give you that clear answer right now, except to say that it's a much deeper work, and it's a force. Because I'll just go back a little bit towards the Second World War. On the face of it, the two of them were just sitting in their rooms in Pondicherry. But if you go through their evening conversations, very often what he would say in an evening conversation to his closest disciples, 3 days later, Churchill was saying the same thing. So we know those things. So they were acting at a different plane. We also have the story of this American soldier who was deployed in Normandy and stuff like that, who constantly, he was in charge of a regiment, who was constantly, he was constantly seeing a face and hearing commands of what to do with his regiment. And like that, he was able to save it several times. And he named these people for himself, Great Sir and Heaven Lady. Unfortunately, he would only discover who they were after 1950 when The Life Divine was published in America, and he saw the face of Sri Aurobindo, and that was Great Sir. So, I do believe that the nature of their work was such that they were never putting themselves in front, because for that there are hundreds and thousands of people. And I believe in our country right now, it's very alive. It is tremendous to hear the youth talking about the soul of India. It's like when we're talking about the Renaissance, it's there. So the best we can do is to really support that with the inner force. I don't know as yet. I must say, on the one hand, I feel like going out and writing and presenting stuff, but I don't know if that is the right action for Auroville as yet.
We'll take up other two questions, India, Pakistan, and by extension Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and other things. When Sri Aurobindo talks and writes about these things, he goes beyond the externalities. He doesn't look at only the geographical boundaries because of which a nation is called a nation, but over the course of evolution, he looks behind these so-called nations and also tracks the growth of a soul which is supporting the growth which culminates in a nation on the outside. So when Sri Aurobindo looks at it, he looks at the soul of India as something distinct and unique, in contrast with the souls of several other nations. And the soul also has a body, and what we see physically is the body of that soul. So in a certain sense, India's soul is one, undivided, but its body has become divided now. And in a certain sense, without the body coming together, aligning themselves under the soul, both these will be debilitated. They cannot function with their full force. Now, in the process of this unification, we cannot say that one part has to become subservient to another part and that is the only way of joining. That is not how the body works, because each part of the body has got its own significance, and we need a soul which can unite these things and make it into one individual whole. So looking at that point of view, Mother always brings out the concept of Akhanda Bharat. The soul is one, the body is as yet divided, and because the body is divided, its effect will be very less. Second question, Sri Aurobindo and the Gandhiji being hijacked by people who follow a narrower concept, in a certain sense is inevitable, because during their writings, I would say, nobody has explained better Hinduism as Sri Aurobindo has explained and put it also in a context. And also, after doing that, he has in a certain sense disowed Hinduism also. He said, I don't belong to any ism. And look at Mother's clear statement, I don't belong to any nation, any country, any ism, I go beyond. Now this going beyond is in the nature of exceeding. The exceeding doesn't reject the lower truth, but brings the lower truth and gives each one of it in its right place, so that recognizing the fact that Sri Aurobindo was born as an Indian, he can still exceed the state of being just an Indian. And this is the aspect that we have to bring out without really trying to fight with other people who try to pull down, because there is enough writings in these two peoples just to falsely identify them with a narrower area. So these are the two things. Coming back to the other two questions on sustainability and inclusiveness. The one way of overcoming, we think inclusiveness is a modern concept, it is coming from the West, because before inclusion there was an exclusion. That is why they have to counter it with inclusion. Oh, we left out a few people, now let us include everybody because somewhere it doesn't feel. Therefore, as a counter movement to exclusivism, excluding certain people, inclusiveness came. The spiritual way of looking at things is, within each one of us there is a divinity. And that divinity has a possibility of manifesting something which is unique. And when everybody does it, the whole creation becomes complete and fulfilled. Now, looking at this point of view, how can we exclude anybody? Because not only living beings, even the non-living beings have a consciousness in them, giving each one a unique position. And the only way of being truly inclusive is not externally bringing together people artificially, because then it will end up in people fighting with each other, but understanding their uniqueness and the divine component in them, and that realization itself will enable us to include everybody. Inclusivity doesn't mean blindly bringing together all the people, but giving them each its due place, due recognition, and also helping them to evolve in harmony with each other. Coming back to sustainability, well, for sustainability to happen, I will say this fundamental realization is essential, because sustainability is in a certain sense connecting us and putting us in harmony with everything around us, because nature left to itself has already achieved a good amount of harmony. But its way of evolving is at any moment of time, if it finds that a greater harmony needs to be achieved, it will pull down everything and then restart again. Well, in our definition of sustainability, well, there has to be a continuity. And therefore, in order to achieve that, first, there is a fundamental realization of the divinity inside everybody. And the second one is, in that sustainability, we will have to find a greater harmony by reaching out to a depths which were not plumbed as of yet. So the true solution for sustainability lies in reaching out to a depth from where we can actually figure out who belongs to where and the position of each one of us. So this is one way of approaching sustainability too.
I should thank you for that question to begin with, because I come from a space where to not address the elephant in the room, in every room today, is not sharing anything at all. And it is a bit difficult for me to restrain or not talk about this today. Like has been already pointed out, the challenge in Auroville is multifold. Auroville is dependent on far too many factors, physically, institutionally, and that is strengthened this position of being non-political. But the other point that you mentioned is very critical today, because with the increasing articulation of divisive forces, inclusive forces need to talk. It is important to acknowledge that whether there is a Vivekananda or a Gandhi or Aurobindo, they all had differences, but it is something more universal, more fundamental, more strengthening that all of them were articulating. To acknowledge the differences, not to brush them aside, but to say yes, they had differences, but yeah, over and above all those differences, there is something that they were trying to strengthen. And to me, that strengthening is the love of this land that they all had. And but that is not to brush aside access to land. Because when I talk about love to land, when recently in Farmers Forum, one young Dalit leader stood up to and asked this question: I don't have access to land to begin with. What do you want me to love? And there are serious questions that we cannot brush aside today. And I think the more we assert that despite differences, there is that which unites everybody. And that is this capacity to recognize the truth and that which, and call violence by its name. Because violence, nobody is promoted. This entire thing of violence being equated to rajas today. Violence is not rajas, to capacity to produce is rajas. You know, in the name of promoting rajasic value among all of us, saying that this is productive, violence cannot be promoted. Divisiveness is not the way to manifest wealth in society. Inclusively, we have manifested wealth before. And that is where for me to, I think, understand how our own institutions have worked, whether it is through our own understanding of historical work or the current social work that is happening, is important. So that is not to deny, that is not to confuse, because there are to be more people who are to talk about what is it to talk about sattvic and rajasic values today. Because it is masquerading as something else. How do you? Because you cannot get rid of a misrepresentation of what you have come to recognize as Hinduism today, right? You cannot. You can only do what is you by asserting something else. And to me, I look at asserting that which I call dharma. In fact, go back to David's question also. Today I look at sustainability. Man, recently I just put this down. Last year I had written something on this saying that to sustain is dharma. So, and for me the definition of dharma goes back to what one of the scholars who used to live here has written, ethical social engagement. The lack of ethical social engagement is the fundamental problem because of which things are not in a sustainable way today. Can we recreate ethical social engagement in society, among corporates, among governments, among ordinary people? So, to me, to assert that as the crux of that which you call a faith of this land, this truth that is recognized by everybody. This is the truth that you get this fellow who sells lemons outside a Denjaudi shop, who gives you this 2 extra because he thinks that he likes you. For whatever reason, he thinks you're a man of truth, so I'm giving you this extra. Why does he do that? This is when something that our people recognize. And I think in articulating that, what is ethical, what is social today, I'm just standing up and calling out violence, calling out divisiveness by its name at every given opportunity. Is critical, it is important. And I do it outside of here simply because I respect this institution of Auroville. And Auroville is repeatedly kept itself in that particular space. And while I recognize and sometimes get frustrated, why are we not taking this position? I also respect and acknowledge that yes, this is the way. There are to be spaces that talks about something deeper and something wider and higher, and this is that space. But I'm also recognizing the fact that this place also could be threatened by the same divisive forces. I'm not ignorant of that. So I also recognize that the same forces that are spreading violence and divisiveness could be all around this area. I know they are. So it is, when it becomes existential, I guess everybody will take a position or a stand. Right now it is not there. And my hope rests with the fact that still there are people out there are young people out there who are currently standing up. And I don't think even those who are talking about these, I just now come from Sevagram, but 10 to 15 days ago I was in Varda attending a very interesting and a very difficult meeting for myself, where I found myself surrounded by a whole lot of people who were talking a completely new language, which was insightful and learning for me. But when one engages further, one recognizes that this mob kind of a culture that sometimes we see around us today. It is an illness of a different kind. And I will go back to Gandhiji's talk about modernity. I think this is one of the outcomes of modernity. The way we have from the university to not understanding, Ashish Kotari, who was here some time back, last year, January this year, he has been asking this one question in every university he goes, and he was sharing this insight, and he said, people have stopped reading newspaper now. It's very simple. I was with him in another college where he was giving a talk, and he asked, how many of you read newspapers? And nobody did. Yesterday I asked the same in another college. And people say, no, nobody. One, because at one level they say media has become very polarized, so we don't know which one is the right one. Another is, we all got tuned to technology that gives news that we choose to believe. Everybody in their phone gets news that they choose to believe. And the phones are also programmed. So just to summarize that, I think there is a need to continuously address this from a different platform and a different space. But yeah, like I said, there are small aspects of it that day-to-day basis one can address, one can talk about quite a bit. But for me, fundamentally it is about talking about dharma again and again in its various manifestations. And talking about love, in fact, earlier this year, I think, Swadharma people, somebody asked me, how do you make change? All that I told young people is fall in love with everybody you see. Easy. If you're in love all the time with everybody, you cannot subscribe to all these divisive forces. And fall in love and take over and be a proactive, reach out. These are things that I find easier today. And these are things that will help us to build a ecosystem, because this is a long trot. This is not easy. This is going to be around for the next 10, 15 years. And we need to be ready for that.
So one thing is, I don't go for literature background. So one thing, as Vinoba ji said, think globally, act locally. That's the solution for sustainability and inclusiveness, which we understand. And secondly, I want to give a small example that most of the time, don't mind me a fault that I'm taking the caste name. Dalit community is being focused that they are against Gandhian philosopher, Gandhian principles, and Gandhians, they don't concentrate more on Dalit empowerment or including the Dalit community with the Gandhian principles. So there are lots of debates and discussions are going on, like Gandhi versus Netaji, Gandhi versus Bhagat Singh, Gandhi versus Aravind, which is going on, Ambedkar. So what we did, because instead of claiming or complaining with any other people, recently in Gandhi 150, we organize yatras. We don't organize conventional programs like conferences, seminars. We used to go to the people like yatras, Padyatra, Cycle Yatra, Vahikal Yatra, like that. So recently we organized one yatra in Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry to celebrate the Gandhi 150, to give the message to the young generation, reaching out to 150 institutions. So we took nearly 30 youths, and the first condition in that yatra we kept is 25 youths should be there from the tribal and Dalit community. And you cannot believe that all the Dalit community youths, they organized the yatra, they communicated with the commissioners, they communicated with the DCPs, they communicated with the college heads and institutions, and they were from 8 districts from Tamil Nadu. Now, I didn't teach them anything about Gandhi or Vinoba or Sarvodaya, anything. Now they are propagating the message of Gandhi after 20 days of yatra. So, as one part of that, yesterday 2 guys from Kadalur district, they were there with us for a short period of time for this program. And one Mayaraj, who is a Dalit leader, he now involved with Sarvodaya principle. Now Ilay Kumar, he is from Dharmaburi district, right? He is promoting the Gandhian values, right? He went to Gandhi Research Foundation to study the things. So likewise, we have to, instead of making debates or complaints, we have to put some practical things which could give more and more practices and learnings to the people. Thank you.
I just wanted to add, one of the things which has really vitiated the atmosphere in the country is a manipulation of knowledge. And we've lost knowledge. Our kids have lost knowledge. They don't know anymore, and we can run people against each other. And that space has to be regenerated, so that people know exactly, what. So that is one thing. And just to go back to your questions, inclusiveness, when that is at the larger scale of the country. Were you talking about inclusiveness, Oroville specific or general?
Whatever you'd like to
Whatever you'd like to say. I think it just goes with the territory. And the more it's, you just learn to, that is, inclusiveness is almost the learning process of becoming an Orovillian, of acceptance, of recognition, of respect. That is there. And the fact that you have people from the bioregion also, I still remember at a time when everybody was living in huts and there was nothing else to live in. And somebody asked the mother, should somebody coming from outside have the same kind of place to live in like somebody coming from the village? And she said, well, if that person cannot live in the same kind of place as the villager, then that person is not an Orovillian. So that inclusiveness and that recognition is there from the beginning. And in the growth of this town, obviously there's going to be a lot of people from the local area, as well as people from around the world, and we have to, it's not an easy fit always. There's so many barriers to cross, just of understanding, but that is what is being done. So that is there. Sustainability, one last thing, is sustainability has to be taken through all the levels, not just the environment, not just the water. It has to include land, it has to include even human relations, it has to include economy, all those things to be truly sustainable. And for Orwell, there's a very, I told you about, this whole thing about the evolutionary aim, and there is this, help me because I'm hopeless at quoting it. There's this quote from the mother which says, for millennia, human beings have been depending on outer mechanisms, outer technology, outer means to solve their problems. On the contrary, Orwell is a place for the reversal of this value, to find that. And this is the place of accelerated evolution, to be able to conquer the problems of the world through the power of that spirit. Now that is eminently sustainable, and that is where we have to reach. Right now, we may plant trees and everything, but we depend on everything else. So that's another kind of sustainability, which has grown from the conscious.
Now, join this theme of sustainability. One concrete challenge is how do we link sustainability to evolution? Because sustainability, as it has been talked about and practiced, most of the time it has become an apology of status quo. And both Gandhi and Sri Aurobindo challenges us to realize that apology of status quo is not sustainability, including dharma. So we need to think about sustainability as evolutionary flourishing, which also would have a dynamics of abandoning non-sustainable institutions and practices, including economic organizations, so on and so forth. And about inclusion, now most of the time, the very discourse of inclusion has been another guise for incorporation and assimilation. And therefore, inclusion is not incorporation. Inclusion is the practice of being together with dignity and diversity. But it also requires struggle. Speaking about land, let us not forget the struggle for dignity of land that was part of the freedom struggle, including in Bande Mataram. Sri Aurobindo is also raising the question of going back to villages and dignity of land in that way. And let us also not forget that in the struggle for land, out of many people who have struggled, another heroic example is Sheikh Abdullah. Sheikh Abdullah of Kashmir, the friendship between Gandhi, Nehru and Sheikh Abdullah for struggle for land, and getting inspiration from Vinoba Bhave today, Ekta Parishad, which is now in a journey, you told in Armenia, so that is also a land dignity movement. My final submission about unity is, as Anu has mentioned about Sri Aurobindo's invitation to work for unity, but Sri Aurobindo also challenges us to think about why unity. And that question of why unity is a fundamental question. Why do you want unity? Do you want unity for domination? And as it is Women's Day, let me share with you a journey that an exemplary woman of contemporary India, Radha Behen, her name is Radha Bhatt, she went to Pakistan. And what is her story? And she told that she would not like to live in a hotel, she would stay with a family. And she went to a market and a shopkeeper would not allow her to live until that shopkeeper presents her a Pakistani jari sari. And then I was present in a dialogue in India International Center. Swami Agnivesh told that when he came to Pakistan, he came with his turban, that he is a Swami. And his Muslim hosts would, put him in their houses, prepare vegetarian food. So therefore, this is the journey of unity that is happening. Another very important project is a very inspiring priest who works in Odisha. He initiated a project called Letters to Friend. He put the students of Pakistan and India to write letters to each other. And therefore, just the concluding thought not to forget that in fighting against fascism, as Sri Aurobindo was challenging us, Gandhi wrote 2 letters to Hitler. If Gandhi could write 2 letters to Hitler, What prevents us, each one of us, writing a single letter to another fellow being who may be located in Pakistan, including a very favorite person called Imran Khan. And if you talk to the girls 30 years ago, the girls of India, they kept images of Imran Khan in their secret places. So why not, in that spirit, let us start writing to letters, let us embrace that our brothers and sisters of Pakistan, they are also our fellow beings, and together we are confronted with this challenge of destruction of life.